This is the Bevo Buckets podcast on the Burn Orange Sports Network, hosted by Will Iger, Seth Berger, and unfortunately tonight our co-host Ryan Hopper can't make it. But every Tuesday night, usually us three, will be on the Burn Orange Sports Network to talk Texas basketball from around 30 minutes to an hour. And we will also discuss some of the biggest storylines in college basketball as the season goes on. Seth, how are you doing this week? It was a tough one for the Horns. But first, just checking in. Everything good with you?
All good for me this week, Will. Tough week for the Horns. First one was, you know, not really ever a game. They made a little run at the end, but really not a competitive game for the vast majority of it. And then the second game of the week was there on the road, repping the Burnt Orange in Nashville. Back and forth game, big bubble game. And unfortunately, the Horns could not pull that one out. We'll get into both of them, but I think we should jump right in with the Arkansas game, first game of the week.
Yeah, let's get right into it with Arkansas. I think you said it best. This is probably the worst possible week this Texas team could have going into its match with Arkansas. Texas is hot. They won three of his last four and come off some of the team's arguably best performances of the season with the blowout win on LSU last Saturday, and even that comeback victory over Texas A&M that we still might be drinking the Kool-Aid from a couple weeks ago, and even that loss to Ole Miss last Wednesday against its former head coach Chris Beard. You could argue that Texas should have won the game and that they were in the driver's seat for the majority of time there, even going into the last 4 to 5 minutes or so. I've not checked Joe Lenardi since Monday night, but as of Monday night, Texas was a 10 seed going to the tournament. They were a 9 seed as of last week. This Arkansas team, they really got the best of Texas. You know, they came off its best win of the season and at Kentucky. And like the Kentucky game, we saw the talent of this Arkansas roster on full display, something that many around the country expected from this squad since the start. And Arkansas led by as much as 23 points in this one. They're 52-29 with around 13 minutes left in the second half. And there's only one lead change in this one. And Texas did crawl its way back, especially in the second half of the game, cutting it to single digits. But their effort was just not enough as they just couldn't get the ball rolling early on in the first half. Seth, what were your overall thoughts on Texas's 78-70 loss to Arkansas?
Yeah, they got smacked in the mouth early. They had a long scoring drought at the end of the first half going into the second half. And you look at the percentages at the end, Texas shot 34% from the field, 27% from three, and a few of those were chucked up there at the end to try and close the gap. So throughout most of the game, Texas really couldn't get anything going. And quite honestly, from an aesthetic perspective, Arkansas looked like they were just imposing their will on Texas. I mean, John L. Davis, we talked about this last week, looks extremely comfortable now. We mentioned that maybe this is because Boogie's out and he's comfortable. He can run the show from point. Thiero looked like a man amongst boys for a while there, and so did DJ Wagner. And then Zvonimir Visic also provided a nice punch there. So Arkansas looked deep. They looked like the team that was promised early on this year. And Texas, they really have to do a better job of playing with energy. Almost like they pack that 10-15 minute punch, but they got to get that from the jump. You can't be desperate when you're down 12 with 2 minutes left. You got to have that from the tip.
Completely agree, Seth. And Texas, you know, as you said, they really struggled in this first half. I mean, they struggled in the overall game, but in the first half, they only scored 24 points. They had 8 out of their 11 turnovers. And you look at the free throw attempts, you talk about a Thiero, someone who can get to the line. Arkansas had 18 free throw attempts to Texas 3 free throw attempts in the first half. So you talk about the energy, the aggression coming out from the jump. It was clear that Arkansas really set the tone in this one. That being said, it is a tale of two halves, and Texas did get hot in that second half. Even from three, they were able to shoot a little bit better. Overall in the game, they did not shoot well, but in the second half, they shot 33%, and they got to the free throw line a good amount as well. So definitely a lot of adjustments made by Terry in that second half, just as we were saying, not enough. You anything else noteworthy from this game or of concern from Texas as of what really happened here? I have some couple thoughts too that may not just be this game, but from the season in general that Texas needs to improve on.
Yeah, I'm relatively confident you have the same concern or very similar, and that's toughness inside, and overall in general. Rodney said, Coach Terry said after the game, after the Arkansas game, we have to be tougher. We have to be more physical. The rebounds were Texas actually out rebounded Arkansas, but you look at it from a physicality perspective when you're guarding your man, you're backing him down. In Texas, just look the last couple of games, they've been getting manhandled, honestly, when it's mattered and really in long stretches of time. And Rodney said that after the Arkansas game, and not to jump too far ahead, but they looked honestly perhaps even softer in the Vanderbilt game. And so it's frustrating because we had a stretch there where, and I don't want to put all the blame on Caden Shedrick because this team isn't really deep at the center position, but these guys got to step up and really be a little bit more physical if they're going to try and make a nice run here down the stretch of the SEC season to cement themselves in the tournament.
I completely agree, Seth, and I think like many Texas fans in the country, I think they expected more from its transfers, in particular Jordan Pope and Trayvon Mark, who Mark, I believe, was Arkansas's leading scorer last year, and Pope, who was Oregon State's leading scorer and a top scorer in the Pac-12 last year. And specifically, well, both these guys, we've seen what they can do offensively. We've seen in spurts. I mean, look at Mark, he did his season high 18 against LSU on Saturday, right? He had the floater off the glass against Texas A&M for the game. He had 15 in a big win in Norman, in Oklahoma, one of the team's best wins of the year. And this year, he is just, I think he's a little bit banged up. I know he didn't play against Vanderbilt. He missed a lot of games early on in the year. Um, but he just hasn't been able to get it going. He didn't score against his former team. He's only averaging 7.7 points per game this year. That's down from 16.2 last year. He was an all SEC preseason third team honoree, and he's only shooting 37% from three. He shot 48% on the year last year just from the field in general. And if this Texas team is going to need to step up, Mark's gonna and Pope are gonna have to be two of those guys because we know what they're capable offensively and what they bring to the table or what they can bring to the table, but their defensive skill set is not what they're known for. So if they can't get the job done on offensively, then they're gonna have to figure it out on the defensive end, especially going into this week, which we'll get into later against two really good teams and two of the best guards in the country in Mark Sears and in Lamont Butler.
Absolutely. And I think we can move into the Vandy game here. So Rodney Terry says after the game, we have to play more physical. We have to play better defensively. And in the Vandy game, I was really disappointed in some of the things I saw. First off, at first we had, we had Jalen Carey banging down low. By the second TV timeout, he was basically in or approaching double double territory. He was imposing his will. Vanderbilt in the beginning of the game couldn't really hit a shot other than second and third chance opportunities. Their first shots were all bricking. And Texas started the game nicely. They started at 7-0, 9-2, and you're thinking, okay. But then the easiest way to gain confidence for any shooter is a layup, obviously, because you just right the boot, especially for a big man. And quite honestly, from there, the defensive game plan should certainly have there should have been more effort to stop Carey because he was really, there was absolutely no boxing out across the board. Vanderbilt was getting second, third, sometimes fourth chance opportunities. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, Seth, and the Vanderbilt team that we talked about last week is not only undersized compared to the rest of the top teams in the SEC, but even undersized to a Texas team that plays Kane Shedrick around 6'10", 6'11", and Tariq Onyema at 6'7" inside. And Carey, he comes off the bench. This was, I mean, he's a great player, and he had a very good night against Texas. I give him a ton of credit. But Jalen Carey on the year, it's not like he's done anything kind of out of the ordinary, outside against this Texas team. And that's kind of another kind of reoccurring theme that we've seen from the Longhorns is that against other good big men, they have not been able to get the job done. And we'll see if that changes as the season goes on, specifically this week against, again, two other really good teams. But I don't know what this Texas team is going to need to do, turn things around, because it doesn't seem like the issue's fixable. And it was Carey's season high for points with 18. It was also his season high for rebounds with 14. And what else? Season high field goal attempts, season high field goal makes. I mean, it was a career day for Jalen Carey. And on top of that, they at least Texas attacked him defensively. He had 4 fouls on the night, and they at least tried to attack him. But you look at that 4 fouls compared to Kane Shedrick. Shedrick fouled out of the game and wasn't much of a factor, especially in that second half, although he did get to the free throw line a good amount. So if Texas is going to want to have to turn things around, I agree with you, Seth. Although we've talked a lot about the guards play, specifically, I just did mention Pope and Mark earlier. I think inside, we're also going to need to see some changes for the Longhorns.
Yeah. And I do want to say, I also thought that the rotational defense, particularly on the perimeter, was lacking. When they showed the first half Vandy highlights on the scoreboard, almost every single bucket was a putback layup or it was a rotational blown assignment or getting over to their man too slow. And look, Mark Byington runs a really good offense. It was really effective at James Madison. It's effective at Vanderbilt. It really you capitalize on your strengths. And Jason Edwards and AJ Hogard and Chris Manone is a good backcourt combo. Tyler Nickel was killing Texas with the threes in the first half. But I did a couple things I want to point out that I did like that Texas did. When AJ Hogarth, and this happened to him a lot at Michigan State, when he starts trying to do this little ISO ball, mid-range pull up, it doesn't end well. He's better as a distributor and when he's attacking the basket. And that's why Texas, he ends up with 4 of 15. He didn't turn it over much, but he was really inefficient from the floor. And I thought Texas did a good job of kind of letting that fall into their hands. And then I think they did a much better job on nickel in the second half. And I really liked, we can get into this. I really liked what I saw from Pryor. And for the most part, I mean, Larry took a couple of bad shots, but I thought that he played his best offensive game of the year.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned the good things Texas did. By the way, forgot to mention the score. Texas lost 86-78 on Saturday against Seth Berger in the arena for that one. Let's talk a little bit about Texas difference makers, Devon Pryor and Julian Larry. I think both they're on the floor because of their defense. Pryor specifically because of his length. He's seen an increase of minutes as the season's gone on, specifically as of late. He had 24 minutes in Texas's loss to Vanderbilt on Saturday. That's, I believe, fifth in minutes behind, Johnson, Kaluma, Pope, and Larry. So it's clear that Ronnie Terry wants Devon Pryor on the floor and doesn't just want him on the floor in the middle of the game, but he wants him on the floor in crunch time too to guard the other team's best guard. He's been huge without Kendall Weaver. And Julian Larry on the other side of things, he started in this one in place of Tremont Mark. What I love about Larry is he knows how to push the pace and set the tempo for this Texas team. I like the pace he plays with. He plays fast. He tries to get easy buckets, and he attacks the rim. He may not have the best three-point shot, but he's not afraid to take chances at the rim. We've seen him try to dunk on Franco Para of Tennessee. We've seen other instances where he's really made the effort to get to the free throw line. And that's exactly what this Texas team needs. Larry, his key kind of skills offensively and setting the table for the others, setting the pace in his attacking of the rim, the other team's big mans, and Pryor on defense and his ability with his length to shut down the other team's best guard. Do you believe that Rodney Terry should look to continue to play these guys specifically in crunch time? We've seen Larry on the floor with Pope and Johnson as of late. We haven't really seen Devon Pryor on the floor in key crunch time minutes. Do you expect Ronnie Terry or think that he should look to Larry and Pryor in more of these close game situations?
Well, in this sense, he had to because you're without Trayvon Mark and you're without Kendall Weaver. You have to assume at this point you're without Kendall Weaver possibly for the rest of the year, maybe rest for a little while here because there's really no timetable on his return. But yes, I think Pryor has certainly earned minutes. I thought he was solid defensively. He provided a little spark offensively too, and on the glass, he was down there. He didn't actually get any offensive rebounds, but he was playing with intensity down there that quite honestly, I thought a lot of the Texas players lacked. They looked a little methodical. There was a sense of malaise. You had Trey Johnson had one of his worst halves of the season, the first half. He scored 0 points and really he turned it over a couple times. I mean, it just didn't look like he was right. Um, Goes 5 of 14 from the field. Kaluma went 3 of 11 from the field. Pope went 3 of 10. And when your three best players combine for 11 of 35 from the field, you're on the road, you're just not going to win, short of maybe at South Carolina. But it's not a recipe for success. And so for this Texas team that we've talked about, next guy up, somebody stepping up, need more options. It's exciting to see a guy like Pryor maybe move himself into that, slide himself into that third or fourth offensive scoring option, and perhaps even uh, six man coming off the bench. He's been exciting. He's been a lot better, and he's had to play with injuries and. I think that you'll start to see him eating into a lot of Jason Kent's minutes. Jason Kent probably played his best offensive game, but defensively he was pretty brutal. Kind of just getting beat off the dribble. You saw him offensively. The Jason Kent experience is Jason Kent missing 3 out of 4 free throws and then hitting a three in the corner. Uh, so I think Pryor should probably take a good chunk of his minutes there. I don't think you'll see Kent playing more than 5 to 8 minutes a game anymore moving forward or once they're whole.
Completely agree with you. Hopefully Weaver can play again this season. Hopefully we see Mark back out on the floor for Texas. Texas, they have 3 road games left at South Carolina, which you briefly mentioned. They're at Arkansas, which is a tough environment. They're at Mississippi State. You were there in Nashville at Memorial Gymnasium. What was the atmosphere like there? And did you see that atmosphere, the loudness of the stadium, play into anything down the stretch? Because it was a close game, was a back and forth, and Texas did have the lead in the second half. It's not like Vanderbilt dominated this basketball game.
Well, first off, really unique arena, probably one of the most unique college basketball arenas in the country. It was originally built to be a theater, and it's a really weird layout. Students are close. The floor is raised a little bit like the barn in Minnesota there. But because it's a theater, it's almost like you had four sections. The two on the side come in a little bit, and then the two on the sides kind of move back. The benches are on the baseline behind the basket. It's a really unique arena, very, very cool. Old, but historical. Fitting for Vandy, it felt. And, I'm props to Vandy. They've taken huge strides in football and basketball this year. They made a bowl game in football. They're probably going to be a tournament team in basketball. Baseball is obviously always great. So really, this is probably the best athletics year Vandy's had in quite some time. Credit to them. As far as road environments in the SEC, I would imagine I haven't been to all of them, but just based on watching games and I've been to a couple here. Probably toward the bottom, the student section maybe not as knowledgeable about basketball as other student sections, stadium not as full as other stadiums. It was a noon game on a Saturday too, so not the best time for a big college basketball game. They got loud periodically, but it wasn't anything that the Horns have should be, you know, fearing having been to better road environments this year. Texas A&M obviously got up for that game. Florida, that's tough. And then you got you're lucky in a sense because you didn't have to go to Knoxville. You don't have to go to Lexington. You do go to Arkansas, which if they're playing better basketball the way they've been playing lately, that place will be rocking. And we know they hate Texas. But in a way, you avoided some of the tougher places playing the SEC. So props to Vandy, but there's no reason that Texas should have been phased by the crowd.
Yeah, Seth. I watched this one. It looked like compared to other Vanderbilt games or home basketball games, this one was a rowdy one. But you're right, compared to others SEC environments, wouldn't say this is a top 10 environment
And
in
there's no
the
doubt you're
SEC.
going to get hate anywhere you go by playing in the SEC, and especially with a name brand like Texas. Even though, Texas is basically a 10, 11 seed right now, the kids there, they were chanting F Texas. They were not fond of the Longhorns and throwing the horns down. For the most part, people were friendly to me. A couple kids chirped me, but that's part of the fun of going on the road. I wish the Horns would have pulled it out, but now they're staring down the barrel of a huge week. Two top 15 opponents. You got number two Bama coming to the Moody Center at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and you got Kentucky Saturday at 7. Both games on ESPN on the main network. So, what do you think? Bama playing as well as anybody right now?
Hands down, they're playing as well as anyone right now. And this Bama team, we saw them in the Final Four last year, losing to the defending champs Utah. UConn. Not only did they return some of their best players, but they also brought in the second best recruiting class in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. And they brought in so many great transfers, including Clifford Amorie, Aiden Holloway from Auburn, Chris Youngblood, who's come on of late from USF. And I'm even looking at some of these guys, Houston Millette. He barely plays for them. He averaged 15 last year, Pepperdine out there in Malibu for my neck of the woods. So it seems like Bama's just bringing in everyone, and one of their key contributors, Latrell Wrightsell Jr., he's been out since early December, and he's done for the year. And that being said, this Bama team is still third in the country, and they're led by their two returners, Grant Nelson at the 4/5, and Mark Sears, aka Baby Jalen Brun or young Jalen Brunson in my eyes, because it looks like they play the exact same way. I mean, Sears averaging 18 and 5. He's a lefty. He can score at all three levels of the game, just like Brunson. His footwork is phenomenal, and he is big, fast, and can score anywhere on the floor. And if I'm Texas, this is the guy I'm looking to key in on. I don't know who they're going to throw on him. Sure, it's going to be a bunch of different Texas players, but Mark Sears, who I could see having a future in this NBA because of what Jalen Brunson able to do as a lefty small point guard, I think could have a big game against Texas.
Yeah, you mentioned the surplus of transfers stacked onto an already stout basketball program. Final Four appearance, like you said. Chris Youngblood, since he's been back, they're like 12 and 1, 13 and 1. He didn't play until mid-December and honestly didn't look right until mid-January. And that's a huge deal. And I think really props to Nate Oates and his staff because you've had a lot of these transfers, and sometimes when you look at teams with a huge chunk of transfers coming in, it's hard for them to adapt, or maybe the team's not fluid. Cliff Amorie was a complete back to the basket big at Rutgers. And this year, in the Bama games I've watched, I haven't seen him back anybody down once. He's a front, he's a completely different player. He plays within the confines of their system, and it's clearly working because they're second in the country in 2-point percentage, field goal percentage. So a team that plays fast pace with tempo and it's effective. And quite honestly, I'm a little nervous for this game for Texas because this is an Alabama team that's lost once since the start of December, and that was a home game to Ole Miss and Chris Beard. But they've won some big ball games here, and they're going to put it in the hoop. They're going to keep coming at you, and Texas has got to be ready to go from the jump. We talk about slow starts at Texas. You have to be ready to go because against Alabama, you could blink and be down 20.
Yes, Seth, I completely agree. Heading this one, they've won six straight, 14 of their last 15. You mentioned in one of those losses to Ole Miss, and they're number one scoring offense in the country at 90 points per game. So Texas has its hands full in this one. That being said, I think Bama has been prone to giving up a lot of points recently, at least against good competition. I mean, they beat Kentucky, but I think what Kentucky put up 97 against them. Vanderbilt put up 87 against them. It's not, in my opinion, the worst thing for Texas to get in one of these high scoring battles. Um, just because it means more shots for Trey Johnson. I like Julian Larry playing fast. Like, I don't think this Texas team cannot keep up with Bama from a pace perspective. From a scoring perspective, I think it's a little bit different, and just in terms of the shots each team's getting. So if Texas can look to get easy shots, efficient shots, then I could see them having success in this game. If they can't, that could be a problem. And Texas, they just lost to Arkansas. Bama, they just beat them in Fayetteville, which, as we talked about environments, that's a tough place to play. So I wouldn't say I'm too optimistic about this one for Texas, but I definitely do expect them to keep it close. Um, should we get into score predictions? Should we wait a
Yeah,
little? You have a
yeah.
score
We talk
prediction for this
about
one?
teams reeling here in the SEC. We played a starving Ole Miss team that was coming off of three straight losses and really got their best shot. We see Arkansas turn the corner, got their best shot. I would like to think that Texas or Alabama is going to see Texas's best shot after losing three of their last four in the last two here. You look at you don't want to concentrate it on too much because you just take care of your business, but you always have it in the corner of your eye once you roll around to mid-February post Super Bowl here, and you see that you're not nowhere near a lock. You're on the right side of the bubble right now, most likely, but you'd like to be a little bit more comfortable. And this is the kind of game that can make you a lot more comfortable. And not to get too far down this road, if you're Rodney Terry, you've heard the outside noise. You've heard people not believing in you. You've heard people calling for your job. This is a huge game for your team at home in front of your fans on a Tuesday night on ESPN to get up and play a great game and win against the number two team in the country. Having said that, I agree with you, Will. I just think Texas can like the pace isn't necessarily the problem. I just think the talent and the scoring and the different ways that Bama could put the ball in the hoop will be a little too much for Texas, especially with Tremont Marks injury status unknown. Kendall Weaver's still out. Everybody's gonna have to step up. I like Bama to win this one, 87-78.
87 to 78. That's a score from Seth Berger. We talked about how this Texas team and Ronnie Terry's gonna have to show up. Let's hope this Texas student body and the corral shows up and shows out. I hope the fans, the Longhorn Nation, they're at this one. They're loud. Because I was at the women's basketball game yesterday, home against South Carolina. South Carolina's first conference loss in 57 games, and the Moody Center was rocking. Arguably the loudest game I've been to at the Moody Center this year. As we said, we were at the A&M one. I was at the Tennessee game at home. Been to a ton of home Texas basketball home games this year, but I would say that women's basketball game yesterday was probably the best environment at the Moody Center I've been to all year. And I hope that Texas fans can bring that same sort of energy tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, or sorry, 8 p.m. Central against Alabama. Um, Unfortunately, I picked Texas a lot to win this year on our podcast. I was 0-2 last week, 1-1 the week before. I'm picking them to lose this week to Alabama, 91 to 79. I'm not sure about Tremont Mark and Kendall Weaver's availability, but I think Texas is going to miss them a lot. We run the defensive end and Mark on the offensive side of things. That being said, I do think that Texas has a chance in this game, and they should be given more of a chance than what they are right now against the Bama team that's very fast paced and high scoring. Expected to be another high scoring game on Tuesday night, but unfortunately, I'm going with the Crimson Tide. Moving on.
Got a
Oh,
score on it?
huh?
A score on it?
91-79. Thought I said it.
91-79. Here's just a little interesting point.
No, I'm gonna go 91-82. I'm gonna say they keep it single digits. Excuse
Big
me.
for the net rankings. A little tidbit here. If you're Texas, Bama's number two, Auburn's number one. You're you got your biggest rival coming up this weekend in Tuscaloosa. I know we've talked about teams overlooking Texas coming into the movie center here. Is there perhaps a bigger overlooked spot than Alabama looking ahead to their biggest rival in a number one versus number two game that's not only never been anywhere close in the Alabama Auburn rivalry history, but that's never happened in SEC history? They've never had a number one versus number two matchup. And we're going to get that this weekend. Potential look ahead spot for Bama. Texas, come out firing. You never know. That's why we throw the ball up.
That is exactly why we play, why we throw the ball up. Texas plays Alabama, as we said, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central on ESPN. On Saturday night, I believe it might be, I mean, it's the first Saturday night home game in a while for this Texas team. They face 15th ranked Kentucky, who they've played opposite of Bama. They've struggled as of late. Um, Losing three of their last six. Those last three losses are same as Texas' last three losses to Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Ole Miss, and a little bit different of an order. But despite Kentucky struggling as of late under first-year head coach Mark Pope, they are super experienced, and Texas has struggled against experienced teams in the past this year. They're led obviously by Tagovailoa, OU transfer, Lamont Butler, the SDSU transfer. They are the key guys for Kentucky. They also have the top offense in the country, ranking third at 86.7 points per game. And this Kentucky team has a huge starting five. Lamont Butler's listed at 6'2". He's their smallest player in the starting lineup. I don't know about you, Seth. Maybe I'm a little bit crazy. I think Lamont Butler, he looks a little bit bigger than 6'2". I would classify him as a big guard. So this Kentucky team is big inside or big on all phases at all positions. And so I could see Texas struggling there. That being said, they're not hot. They're cold right now. And if there's a time to catch Kentucky, it's right now and it's at home, and expect another game where the Moody Center is fired up. Kentucky's blue blood basketball program, one of the best all time. Texas really, has it's rare for them to play this Kentucky team at home. First time they're playing them in SEC basketball. So I expect the Moody Center to be fired up on Saturday night as well as tomorrow night. Seth, what are your thoughts on Texas matchup with Kentucky?
Make a lot of great points there. I think that Kentucky is really big. I really like the roster Mark Pope put together. Obviously, leaves BYU, heads back to his alma mater in Lexington, and gets to work in the transfer portal. And the way he put the team together, he took a lot of really good and really solid players, built that team. So they played really well early on. And like you said, they hit a little bit of a road bump here lately. They had in this weird lull they had this really weird win on the road in Knoxville, and then they took care of business against the worst team in the SEC in South Carolina at home on Saturday. But like you said, this is the time to catch tennis or catch Kentucky. They've got Tennessee on Tuesday. They've got them at home, so we'll see how Kentucky comes into the Moody Center, and obviously we have to wait and see on the Bama game for Texas. So if you're Texas, you could be coming off three losses, and you'd be starving for not only a win but a quality win like Kentucky too. Kentucky plays a really interesting style of play. Their tempo, they play a fast-paced tempo, and they have a pretty efficient offense. Defensively, that's where they've had most of their struggles. They really don't turn over the other team. They don't steal the ball. They let offenses get into their set a little bit, and they utilize their size to try and play defense. And It's been effective at times. Other times, in this recent stretch, they've given up. They've gave up 102 to Alabama. They gave up 89 to Arkansas. They gave up 98 to Ole Miss. So to me, the way they play with pace, it almost in their wins they gave up 73 and 57. So it almost seems like if you break the 75-80 barrier on Kentucky, you're going to win the ball game. And that's something to keep in mind if you're Texas.
Yes, it is. You got a score prediction, Seth?
I think that if Texas comes off the Bama loss, you're going to see a fire lit under their rear. And I think you're going to see Texas come out. Welcome,
Do it.
Kentucky, Boston. Texas wins this one. I was always like the pessimist of the three of us over the last few weeks. You guys would pick the Texas win. I'd pick the Texas loss, and they would lose. The only game I got wrong coming into this past week was the A&M game, which we all guessed A&M. And then I went and picked Texas against Arkansas and Vandy. I drank the Kool-Aid, and Kool-Aid wasn't to be. They lost both of them. So I'm a little nervous now. I'm a little gun shy here after picking them. But I will go Texas against Kentucky. I'm going to go, I think we're going to see a great game. I'm going to go 84-83 Texas.
I like that pick, Seth, because we talked about Bama struggling on the defensive end. I think this Kentucky team is going to really face trouble shutting down Trey Johnson. I think he has the chance to light them up. Kentucky, they gave up a lot of points to Ole Miss, 98. They gave up a lot of points to Arkansas. I'm looking at what Matthew Morrell did to Kentucky this past week. He was 6'11 for three. He put up 24. That was, you could argue, career day for him. Against Arkansas, saw a little bit of the same. Adu Thiero, who's been hot, he had 21. Janelle Davis did his thing. And so why can't Jordan Pope, Trayvon Mark, if he's healthy, if not Julian Larry and Trey Johnson and Arthur Kluma, get the job done on the offensive side against Kentucky? I'm going Texas 78, Kentucky 73 in their first matchup in the SEC against one another. Seth, we're coming down to the end. I'm going to do a quick Longhorns in the pros. Kevin Durant, he's back tomorrow night after a calf injury. He's been out the last couple games. He was not traded from the Phoenix Suns at the NBA trade deadline. Came out today. Really respect what he said. He said that he's not entitled to everything, to anything, and that everybody in the league can be bought or sold. Really interesting quote there from Kevin Durant's rumor that he was going to go to the Warriors in a three-way trade with Wiggins going to Miami, and Jimmy Butler going to the Suns. Instead, Butler went to the Warriors for Wiggins, Anderson, a couple more. Miles Turner, he got injured against my Clippers last Thursday with a neck injury. He's still out. Hopefully, he gets back on the floor soon. And Jared Allen continues to do his thing for the Cleveland Cavaliers, although he got ejected in one of his last games against Detroit for sending an illegal screen on Asar Thompson. But the game after that, he responded, shooting 4 for 4 from the free throw line, 100%. Like to see that from the big fro. Seth, you got anything else before we wrap things up on this week's edition of Bevo Buckets podcast?
A little bracket update. I know you mentioned Joe Lunardi earlier. In the ESPN Lunardi bracket from the 7th, he had Texas at a 10. A lot of the updated ones, CBS, Jerry Palm, some of the other smaller sites had Texas as an 11 today. Or excuse me, this will be out Tuesday, so Monday. And if you look at the bracket matrix, Texas is kind of on that 10-11 fringe, basically in that last four buys. And so this is the time of the year when Texas has got to ramp it up. You got to secure some quad one wins. You got to protect your home floor. You have some winnable games coming up that'll be quad two opportunities. You got to make sure you capitalize on those. And it's obviously always important to secure wins in the SEC. And so a huge last month of the season here before the tournament for Texas.
Yes, I completely agree with you there. Huge months. The season starts tomorrow night against Alabama, and then Texas faces Kentucky on Saturday. Both games at home at the Moody Center. Both games on ESPN Prime Time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Will Iger here with Seth Berger. Shout out to our guy Ryan Hopper at home who could not make it. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Burnt Orange SN and subscribe to our YouTube page, Burnt Orange Sports Network. I'm Will Iger again here with Seth Berger, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a good one.